Hello, America. Today, I want to talk about yet another unsettling truth about our beloved United States, the history of book banning, and how this attack on our First Amendment rights still continues on today, bigger and better than ever. Book banning is not, of course, a new phenomenon in America. In fact, it traces its roots back to the very earliest days of our nation, when colonies enacted laws to censor works deemed heretical or subversive. From the banning of Thomas Paine's Common Sense during the Revolutionary War to the suppression of abolitionist literature in the antebellum South, censorship has long been used as a control to maintain power and control. Throughout history, courageous individuals and organizations have fought tirelessly against censorship and book banning. For example, I will quickly break down a landmark case where a group of students took the issue of book banning all the way to the Supreme Court in Board of Education, Island Trees Union Free School District versus Pico. In 1975, this New York school board pulled a number of books from high school and junior high school libraries that they deemed to be anti-American, anti-Christian, anti-Semitic, and just plain filthy. The school board refused to reinstate many of the titles, even after a committee of parents and school staff deemed the books to be acceptable for student reading. In 1977, 5 courageous students, led by Stephen Pico, sued the school board for violating their First Amendment rights. The district court ruled in favor of the school board on the summary judgment, refusing to grant a trial to determine if the motivation for banning the books was based on a permissible criteria, such as the sexual explicitness, or if the board was acting based on an impermissible desire to suppress ideas. The battle persisted through several more judgments and appeals until the case was finally presented to the Supreme Court in 1982. By that time, the youngest of the complainants had aged from a child of 13 to a legal adult who could read any damn book they wanted. Although the Supreme Court technically ruled in favor of Pico and his friends, their decision was, well, a bit too ambiguous to really be considered a victory. The justices' opinions were split 4-4, and the deciding fifth vote was cast not on the merit of upholding the First Amendment, but more because Justice White thought the dispute was stupid and should have been dealt with by the lower courts. Therefore, no real precedent was set for future cases, the fallout of which we are now seeing nationwide. Today, as we confront a new wave of censorship driven by political agendas and ideological extremism, we must remember the lessons of history. We must recognize that the freedom to read and think for ourselves is not just a privilege, it is but a fundamental right that must be fiercely defended. But even as we reflect on the lessons of the past, we must confront the stark reality of the present, a reality where a new epidemic of book banning is sweeping across our nation, driven by the religious right and spearheaded by groups like Moms for Liberty. According to recent reports, there have been a sharp increase in book banning attempts in schools and libraries across the country, with the religious right forming the charge. From conservative strongholds in the South to suburban communities in the heartland, censorship efforts have reached unprecedented levels, threatening to erode the foundations of intellectual freedom. In states like Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, Moms for Liberty has emerged as a driving force behind the push to ban books deemed inappropriate or offensive by their standards. They target works that challenge traditional gender roles, promote LGBTQ plus representation, or confront issues of race and social justice. As Arthur Neil Gaiman once said, the existence of libraries is the best evidence that we may have for hope for the future of man. Yet Moms for Liberty and other censorship groups seek to undermine this hope, replacing it with fear and, quite frankly, a veneer of ignorance. Make no mistake, my friends, this is not just about removing a few controversial titles from the library shelves. This is about the systemic erasure of ideas, the suppression of knowledge, and the stifling of dissent. It's about rewriting history to fit a narrow, exclusionary narrative, one that elevates a particular brand of religious ideology above all others. We've seen it happen time and again. classic works of literature deemed offensive or inappropriate by those who seek to impose their own moral framework on the rest of us. But it doesn't stop there. Fundamentalists target science textbooks that dare to teach evolution, claiming it contradicts their interpretation of Scripture. They go after LGBTQ plus literature, claiming it promotes immorality. They even target books that discuss race and social justice, labeling them as divisive or anti-American. But let me be very clear here. Missions to dictate moral standards are not about protecting children or upholding values. They are about control. They are about indoctrination. They are about creating a society where only one perspective is allowed to thrive. A society that looks more like a theocracy than it does a democracy. In August of 2022, a seemingly innocuous act in Clay County, Florida, sparked a chain reaction of censorship that rippled through communities far and wide. It began with one parent, Adam Gigelhausen, who lodged 8 requests for reconsideration or review of instructional materials, what we commonly call book ban requests. But here's the kicker. On each form where the district inquired about the objectionable content, Gilhausen simply wrote, "See attached paperwork." And attached he did. Book reviews for esteemed titles like Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale and Sarah Gruen's Water for Elephants, cribbed from booklooks.org. Meanwhile, over 1,500 miles away in Maine, a similar narrative unfolded. Parents and activists, armed with packets of research lifted verbatim from booklooks.org, besieged school districts with demands for book bans. Behind the guise of parental concern was a calculated effort to stifle intellectual freedom, with booklooks.org serving as their weapon of choice. And just what is booklooks.org? Well, on the surface, the website appears to be an objective source of information to assist concerned parents who wish to monitor their children's reading choices. The Booklooks mission is to, quote, write and collect detailed and easy-to-understand book content reviews centered around objectionable content, including profanity, nudity, and sexual content. Our goal is to make these reviews available to all parents so they can make informed decisions, end quote. Now, on a grammatical level, I object to the website's use of the word content 3 times in a single sentence, but otherwise, the site appears to be a reasonable tool for parents and guardians. Again, on the surface. My hope would be for a parent to use the information found on the website not to forbid their child from reading a particular book, but as a stepping stone for the thoughtful discussion with a child about content they might want to talk about and explore with a trusted adult. What the Booklooks website does not advertise to visitors, however, is that it was launched in 2022 by a Moms for Liberty member for the express purpose of supplying ammunition to advance the organization's agenda. This obvious conflict of interest serves as yet another reminder that we must always check the sources of our sources. This latest book banning campaign is not confined to isolated incidents. It's a coordinated assault on knowledge itself. From individual challenges to statewide legislation, booklooks.org is a playbook for those seeking to erase diverse voices and perspectives from our libraries and schools. But behind the veneer of parental concern lies a more insidious agenda, one rooted in the perversion of ideals and the propagation of right-wing fascism. Moms for Liberty and similar groups may claim to advocate for parental rights and educational freedom, but their actions betray a deeper commitment to imposing their own narrow worldview on society. They seek not only to ban books, but to indoctrinate future generations with their regressive ideologies. Their rhetoric is laced with xenophobia, misogyny, and a warped sense of patriotism that demonizes dissent and glorifies authoritarianism. They peddle conspiracy theories, spread misinformation, and foster a culture of fear and division. As journalist Naomi Klein once warned, Fascism doesn't arise suddenly in an existing democracy. It is not easy to get people to give up their idea of freedom and civility. You have to do it slowly. End quote. Groups like Moms for Liberty are doing just that, eroding the foundations of democracy and sowing the seeds of authoritarianism. But the threat of book banning doesn't just stop at grassroots level. In recent years, we've witnessed a troubling surge in legislative initiatives aimed at curtailing intellectual freedom and limiting access to diverse ideas. In states across the country, lawmakers have introduced bills that seek to impose draconian restrictions on the types of books available in schools and libraries. These bills, often championed by conservative politicians aligned with the religious right, aim to sanitize educational curricula and silence dissenting voices. According to recent data, there have been over 100 bills introduced nationwide that target books deemed controversial or inappropriate for young readers. These bills seek to empower parents to challenge books they find objectionable and mandate the removal of certain titles from school libraries and curricula. As Nobel laureate Toni Morrison once said, "You don't have to burn books to destroy a culture. Just get people to stop reading them." These legislative efforts seek to do just that, to erase diverse voices and perspectives from our educational landscape and deprive future generations of the opportunity to engage with challenging ideas. But we cannot allow this assault on intellectual freedom to go unchallenged. We must mobilize, organize, and fight back against these regressive laws with every tool at our disposal. We must defend the right of every individual to access a wide range of literature and make informed choices about what they read. We must resist efforts of censorship with every fiber of our being. We must stand up for the principles of intellectual freedom, diversity, and inclusion that lie at the very heart of our democracy. So let us join together, united in our commitment to defending the freedom to read and think for ourselves. Let us challenge censorship wherever it rears its ugly head, to ensure that our libraries remain beacons of knowledge and enlightenment. The future of our democracy and the minds of our children absolutely depends upon it. My guest today is Mark Alsip, a computer scientist and freelance science writer who has been published by Forbes, the National Center for Science Education, and one of my personal favorite magazines, Skeptical Inquirer. Mark is also the founder of Bad Science Debunked, a skeptical science blog. Mark is here with us today to talk about a personal history that is quite unexpected for a man of his profession. You see, Mark was raised in and indoctrinated into a fundamentalist young earth creationist sect. He went through decades of trauma due to the conflicts between pseudoscientific church teachings and the world of reality that was revealed to him through his love of science. After Mark left religion completely, he thought he'd be able to leave his past behind him and move on. But then the fundamentalists insisted on forcing religious dogma into our government, our laws, our schools, and other secular places. Mark felt it was his duty to fight back, so he is with us today to talk about his new book, Journey to Reason, Walking Away from Young Earth Creationism and Religious Fundamentalism. This book is a first-person account of how fundamentalists are indoctrinated, why they cling to their views, and how they are endangering our democracy by refusing to acknowledge the constitutional separation of church and state. And that's the last word up front. My name is Sean Steinhardt. My guest joins us right after the break. And now it is time for me to bring on our guest, Mark Alsip. And I hope I got your name right.
You got really close, John. You got Alsip.
Alsip.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
That's okay. I apologize.
No worries, sir. No worries at all.
Hopefully, I won't burn in hell for all eternity.
You know where I came from. You get one thing wrong. You're going to hell, man. Sorry, but you tried.
I read your book this weekend.
Thank you.
And it was kind of depressing in a sense.
Yeah.
But it also reminded me a little bit about my own upbringing. And here's your book cover rather.
Yes.
Journey to Reason, Walking Away from Young Earth Creationism and Religious Fundamentalism. Now, you were raised Catholic at one point?
Originally, yes. I tell people I was baptized Catholic, but born Catholic. But the truth is we're all born atheists. But of course, because of the concept of original sin, I was baptized about a week after. And I was Catholic for about 5 years till we moved to the Bible Belt. And then they decided flip the script. Where the Catholics told me Protestants were not true Christians. All of a sudden, the young Earth Creationists tell me they're Catholic Christians. So I couldn't either way.
Yeah, your journey parallels my journey up to the point where I wasn't necessarily raised in a fundamentalist sect per se, but our journeys kind of. I went to Catholic school.
Yes.
As a child, and like you, my problem was that I had questions.
Indeed.
And
indeed.
One, and I think it's funny because there's a story in your book that very much mirrors my experience. My school was in a building that was right next door to the fire department. So every time the fire trucks would leave the station, the teacher would say, "Oh, stop what we're doing. We're going to pray. Blah blah blah." And
wow.
So I made the suggestion one day, thinking this was a bright idea, right? I'm like, well, why wait until after we hear the sirens pray? Why not pray beforehand?
Exactly.
And so the teacher didn't really know what to say, and so tried that. She said, we'll try that tomorrow. So that's the first thing that we did is we prayed, no more fire trucks, blah, blah,
Did
blah.
it work?
And it did not work.
Surprise.
And so that brought up more questions, right? And you in your book, you had an experience that was almost identical to that.
I had several like that. I'm not sure which one we should go to here. But there was the incident where my cousin was hit by a car.
Oh, right.
Yes. So maybe that's a good play part because it does line up what we're talking about. So I was in the yard, saw him run across the street because my sister was bringing candy back to the store. He walked out from behind a bush, car hit him. And I saw the bodies on the road, maybe 30 yards or so. And I don't want to get the blood out of his head.
Sorry, I need to zoom in here.
I'm sorry.
Your audio has a echo.
Yes.
Could you maybe turn off the microphone and start talking again?
Let me. I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm echoing too. All right, I'm out of here.
Is that better?
I think it's fine. I haven't heard any echo on my end, so.
Can you hear me okay now?
No, the echo is still terrible.
I'm not sure. There's a delay when I speak.
Sean, is there something possibly on your end?
I hear you at the moment, but I don't hear.
Oh, you sound to me just like I sound to you.
I don't hear an echo from him.
I don't either. The only echo I hear is Mackenzie.
Okay,
Sean is
the audience is still hearing it. I put a comment from somebody. I'm gonna go ahead and take you out of the studio and back in.
Okay.
And we'll see if that's anything.
Okay. Got a sip of coffee. I don't hear an echo.
No, you sound perfect to me. But I did it with Mackenzie, so I'm not sure.
Okay, so where were we? We were talking about your cousin.
Yes. So my cousin is hit by the car. His body slides down the road, blood draining, and the family gathers around him. And the first thing they do is gather him up and start praying. And Jesus save him. And I was the only person in the crowd who thought, wait a minute, we should probably do something about this. I ran. There was no 911. And I'm sorry, now I've lost audio completely.
No, I can hear you.
Okay, there we go. It came back. I apologize. We'll get through this. So I was the only one that thought, hey, let's not pray. Let's run and call for an ambulance. And the ambulance came and took him away, and they saved his life. But everyone told me that God saved him. They were giving all the credit to this invisible being that really wasn't there. There was no evidence that he was there, and continued to praise him when it really should have been the people who saved him, because had they failed to save him, all the blame would have gone on the people in the ambulance.
Now, not to cut you off, but
no,
the way that you called the ambulance though was, and I'm assuming this. No, I've read the book, so I know better. But I'm assuming that you prayed for the ambulance to come.
I actually, the prayer never entered my mind at that point.
So you used the old way, the phone.
I used the old way. Even though I was a devout Christian, in that moment, this was the kind of critical thinking that I had as a child. And I think you've touched on the fact that you had this critical thinking about, let's pray before. I thought afterwards, well, why didn't my prayers to keep my family safe save my cousin from getting hit by that car? But in that moment, I kind of led a double life, if you will. I had the church life and I had the reasonable, logical life. And just in that moment, the reason kicked in. Later, I did feel guilty for not praying and for chastising the other people for, hey, stop praying, stop moving his body. You're going to do neurological damage if you do this. But yeah, I was made to feel guilty, very guilty about letting go of my religion and doing something secular, which, probably saved his life. It's a very, very strange way of thinking to me.
And yeah, and you mentioned in the book that started some conflict with your family too, because you were in this place where you're like, okay, yeah, I understand we're praying over here, but we should also appreciate the doctors and the paramedics and all of the people that actually played a part in saving this young life.
Yes. It caused a lot of conflict because I would bring it up and do just what you did. I would ask, why don't we pray ahead of time to keep these things from happening? And I was told that, Satan was tugging at my heart. He was putting these bad thoughts in my head, and prayer you heard this before, prayer just doesn't work that way. And as an inquisitive child, I would say, well, I want to know more. I want to know why that doesn't work, because I would pray for things and they wouldn't come true. And people would say, oh, well, that was God's will. And sometimes I would pray for things and they came through and they're like, God granted you that prayer. And I can't really see a difference there between flipping a coin and calling it after it lands. You're going to win either way with that kind of thought process.
Would you say that you were raised in a cult?
Yes, I definitely would say I was raised in a cult. My church was forgive me for making the reference to Jim Jones, but I probably would have drank the Kool-Aid literally had it been offered. I was taught that any disagreement with church doctrine was sinful. And the way they really hooked me, the way they got me, there was a movie that they sent all the children into town to see. It was on the apocalypse of the book of Revelation. And this was back in the 1970s when we didn't show blood on TV. There was no blood or gore. Somebody would get shot in a movie perhaps, and they would just grab their chest and fall down. There was no blood. This movie had people who were on fire, literally burning, reaching out to the screen, to the audience, pleading for their help to save them because they weren't saved. This movie showed a woman drinking Christian blood, the blood pouring down her lips. And this is an audience full of children, Sean. I mean, 8, 9-year-old children. People were curled up in their seats crying. I was terrified. I was holding myself. I was just.
And you was told to shut up at one point.
Yeah. I asked a question and somebody's like, "Hey, you don't talk about this. Don't ask questions about it. Just listen to it and pay attention to what's happening." And the fear this triggered in me, it may sound silly to your audience, but one of the scenes from the movie that really stuck with me, just to show you what can get into a child's mind here, were the 7 angels that were going to blow the horns when the tribulation started. I happened to live near an interstate, and when a truck would go down the interstate at night and blow its horn, I would wake up screaming, with these visions of hell. So I went out and got baptized almost immediately. I was just scared into it. And you would think, because I'm coming to your point about the cult here, you would think that would have made me feel better. And for a little while it did. But then I realized, wait a minute, my mother is Catholic. And my church was telling me that she's not going to go to heaven. So I went to the church and said, what do? I don't want to go to heaven without my mom. I was having nightmares where I would look down from the cloud and see my mom on fire pleading for help. And I would go talk to this bright white light, God, and he would say, no, she had her choice. So what my church told me, and this is where the cult comes in, Mark, you were sent by God to convert your mother. You're here for a purpose. It's your reason for being here now is to save other people, and you need to save your mother. And if I couldn't save her, then she was wrong. She was an outsider, and she was going to be cast aside by God. And if that's not a cult, Sean, I don't know what else you would call it.
Well, you also talked in the book about how you came across wedding photos of your parents.
Yes. My first conflict with church actually came before I became a young Earth creationist. I was 3 or 4 years old, and I noticed in their wedding photos that there was like a fence or a wall in the aisle behind them as they walked down after they said their vows. And I asked, what's that for? And I was told that because my father was a Protestant, he wasn't holy enough to approach the altar in a real church. So they put up a physical barrier to keep my father from approaching the altar at his own wedding. And this really hurt me because my father was the greatest man I've ever known. I mean, his morals, he was a Christian, but and there are good Christians. I'm not here to bash all religion,
Right.
But he practiced right what they're supposed to be practicing. But it was very offensive to me to hear that my dad was not, worthy to approach the altar of a church. So, yeah, my conflict began about age 3 or 4, and it got worse from there. But
yeah, no, I can relate because for me, it got to the point where the teachers would just stop I would raise, they would say something, or and I'd raise my hand, and it got to the point where they'd pretend that they didn't see my hand.
Yeah.
Even if it was the only one raised.
Yeah. And I'm the type of person, if they didn't call on me, I would start speaking anyway. And I got in trouble. I got in trouble a couple times. The very minor one was an argument over prisms, creating rainbows. I was told that rainbows didn't exist until after Noah's flood, and I had just seen a science presentation in class, and I knew the physics, and I explained the physics, and the teacher stopped the class and got angry with me and told the class that Mark was going to burn in hell because he was going against the word of God. The one that really got me in trouble, though, I think if you ever get a note sent home from a Sunday school teacher, you know you're in trouble. We were, again, studying the flood, and it happened to be at the time that Roe v. Wade was passed. And our church didn't tell us exactly what abortion was, but it was killing babies. That was basically, they're baby killers. They're baby killers. And this is a Sunday school class. And I said, well, didn't God kill a lot of babies and children in that flood? And the teacher got a little angry, and she said, well, they're all going to heaven. And I wasn't trying to be a smart ass. I said, well, if they're all going to heaven, aren't the aborted babies going to go to heaven too? She looked like she was having a stroke. It wasn't a gotcha question. I was seriously concerned about these babies making it to heaven. But I don't think that, and it leads back to your intro, your wonderful monologue. Some of these churches don't really give kids credit for being deep enough thinkers. I could see the morality problems between God killing these children in a flood, or the firstborn of Egypt, all the cities that were surrounded, and link that into something else the church was telling me was evil. So now what they do is they don't want to teach us any of these subjects. We're getting to the book bans. They're banning books on these topics. So what I actually learned about medical science and everything, a modern, I hate to call a fundamentalist church modern, but they want to take that knowledge away from kids in the first place. They don't ever have those kind of thoughts. If you keep your audience dumbed down, then they're not going to ask those questions in the first place. And that's one of the really bad things about book bans and in the educational revision we're seeing now.
Yeah. Big time. You mentioned also in your book, and you didn't say this specifically, but you did mention in your book that you thought that the indoctrination that children experience is akin to abuse.
Yes.
Do you think that religion itself is a form of child abuse?
I wouldn't go that far. I don't think that religion is necessary. That's the conclusion I've come to for myself. I do know some very progressive religious people who definitely would not take their children down that path that I did, or that I went down. So it would be really hard to paint with too broad of a brush here and say
Right.
that, religion is abusive, but there are a lot of fundamentalists in religion, and it is a form of mind control. You're giving somebody one side of a way to think of that. So the fundamentalism, definitely abusive. I wouldn't condemn all religion. Again, I don't think we need it. I think we'd be fine. Religion basically took the good morals that were already there, wrote them down in a book, and then put a lot of extra baggage on top of it.
Yeah.
So we could get rid of religion and be fine. But I do know people that find comfort in it. They find meaning in it, because of personal loss or drug addiction or alcohol addiction. And if that helps them, that's fine, as long as they're not pushing it on me. That's when we have problems.
Now, one of the reasons why you wrote this book is because you see this as a fundamental threat to our democracy.
Yes, I do. We are right now with, well, I guess we have to, well, this is a political question because religion has entered the political lane. We are on our way to becoming a theocracy. One of the most immediate threats right here in Kentucky is they are putting a measure on the ballot for November where they're going to overturn part of our Constitution and force taxpayers to fund private religious schools. And I've seen the curricula for those schools, and there's no science, there's no history. They will teach, as I was taught when I was young, that slavery wasn't bad, that it was actually beneficial. I actually learned this in both church and school, and they're doing this in Florida right now. And it's taking away critical thinking. There are people on the floor of the House and Senate right now who are trying to say this is a Christian nation, and they are trying to put their narrow Christian views into law, and it's fine for them, but the rest of us that don't believe that, we don't have any choice but to go along with it anymore. You know, the anti-LGBTQ laws that are coming in, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and they're not done there. They didn't really want to make this just a states' rights question.
Right.
Now that it's gone to the states, they're trying to eliminate it for everybody, and we see that now with the trying to remove some of the drugs from being legal. And if you want that, when I take that and extend it out into the future, I look at us being someone like Iran or Saudi Arabia, where it's actually against the law to speak out against religion. I have actually seen preachers, fundamentalist preachers, say that they do want that. So I don't think people realize how many fundamentalists are out there with these beliefs and how dangerous they are. And we were not founded as a nation on these kind of principles. And unfortunately, we have a charismatic leader right now who claims to be a devout Christian. You can buy his Bibles for $60 now plus shipping, and all the evangelicals are lining up behind him because this man who has admitted to abusing women, assaulting women, grab them by the, they're lining up behind him because they think he's a Christian, or they know they're going to get their Christian agenda in. So, yeah, I see democracy slowly, unfortunately, fading away. And it's very terrifying. And I'm just one small voice, but I do feel the need to speak up.
Your journey spans from, aerospace projects to information technology. You also got into pre-med. How do your experiences in these fields intersect with your, let's say, passion for debunking science denial and misinformation?
It's a good question. Every field that I've been in has required me to speak to experts in a particular science, such as satellite technology or pharmacists or whatever, and be a critical thinker and take what I've learned and take the fluff out of it. Take the I believe this or I believe that, and just look at the facts and make my decisions based on rational beliefs. And that's really the intersection, because when you're talking to a computer on the other end, it doesn't care about what you believe. It's going to do what you tell it to do and nothing else. And that kind of critical thinking is kind of necessary. I've learned not just to talk to computers, but to talk to other people. You can believe all you want to that the program that you just wrote is going to make your car stay on the road, self-driving car, but believing isn't going to get you there.
Right.
And where it really started hitting home is when I became a pre-med student. I was doing hospital pharmacy programming, writing a software that would break drugs down into their components and have them interacting. I thought, this is so wonderful. I want to be a doctor. So at the ripe age of 30, I went back to school, and I got a really wonderful dose of natural science. And it taught me so much about evolution, and it taught me about questions of medical ethics that I never would have considered, like a woman's right to choose. It wasn't this black and white thing. I was presented with, oh, what happens if someone comes in and they're dying? What's going to happen if you have a patient who is terminally ill? A lot of really tough questions that critical thinking hits you with. And fundamentalists don't think this way. Everything in the world is black and white. It's yes or no. There's no middle ground. There's no nuance. So in summary, my career and my education has led me to a point to where I don't really believe in anything. I accept evidence and I make my decisions based on evidence. And yeah, sorry, long answer, but that's how I've come to this point. That was the intersection, is just critical thinking. Don't accept anything based on somebody's word. Learn everything you can and apply that knowledge. Be willing to admit when you're wrong. That's a very important thing, because we're all wrong sometimes, and you
Yeah.
learn from that. So, end of sermon.
Do you think that you mentioned earlier in our interview here that there's a lot of fundamentalists out there?
Yes, I really do.
Do we underestimate them?
We most definitely do, and I think we need look no further than, oh gosh, did we just put 3 fundamentalist Supreme Court justices in place? And how did that happen? How do we let our government get to the point? Well, because fundamentalists voted in politicians who would block Supreme Court appointments until they could get their choices in. And they're all on the same page. They are pushing politicians to push all of these religious laws into government right now. And just look around the country right now. Look at, like I said, the anti-LGBTQ laws, the book bans, the history revision, denial of science, the vaccine denial, the climate change denial. I can actually trace all those things back to my fundamentalist church, where we were told, oh, you don't need to go to a doctor when you're sick. God will heal you. Oh, you can't harm the planet. God will take care of it. And living here in the Bible Belt, I'm exposed to this every day. And if you spend a little time with a fundamentalist group, I have fundamentalist friends and family who are probably I'm gonna try to get them to watch this podcast. I don't know how far they'll make it, but they really believe these things, and there are a lot of them out there. And the proof of it is what's been happening to our government in the past 8-10 years or so.
Well, I think it goes back probably a few decades.
Oh, yes, that's true. Yeah.
Certainly Ronald Reagan had
Reagan was, yes.
And I guess that it's been slow but steady with the religious right in this country. And it's also, they've been very clear in their intent.
Yes.
And the so-called left in America has largely sat on the sidelines and allowed this to happen.
Very much so. You try to tell people this is a problem, and they say, oh, you're overreacting. And I have been saying for years, with every event that happens, like, I saw the Roe v. Wade overturn coming long before it happened.
Yeah.
I saw these laws that are coming in now happening slowly, one after another, and they're not done, and they're not going to quit. They're not finished until we are a theocracy, and that should scare people. People should be paying attention. If there's not enough evidence of it right now, I don't know how much more evidence we're going to need to convince people.
Right.
We're almost to the point where it's, I hate to sound, dismal, but in some ways I almost feel like it's too late, because if a religious question comes before the Supreme Court right now, I could make some money in Vegas betting on which way they're going to rule on that decision.
Yeah, no, well, there's two aspects to that. You've got a very conservative Supreme Court that has got some religious extremists on it for sure.
Yeah.
But they're also very pro-corporate, pro-business.
Yes, that's true.
And so you've got those two elements. And speaking of those two elements, I was wondering if you could kind of talk about, there's been a merger. I mean, there's been a couple of mergers. One of them that you do sort of address in the book, and that's with Israel. And I'll get to that coming up.
Yeah.
But capitalism and religion has kind of come together and found a happy little relationship.
They definitely have. You have. It's amazing when I think of how many leaders. I don't know of a lot of progressive, secular leaders of corporations. The party that seems to be bound to religion seems to be the Republican Party, the GOP.
Yes.
That is part of, if you read the Republican GOP platform, and they are very business friendly. I will be the first to admit that. When you get a $2 trillion tax cut in 2016, and it's boiled up now to the point where it could have paid off half our national debt.
Yep.
Businesses have gotten very cozy with the religious right because it's helping them out. It's putting their candidates into power. It's no coincidence that people like Ted Cruz or Ron DeSantis they're pro-business. Greg Abbott, very pro-business, but they're also very fundamentalist. And yeah, if it makes your stock portfolio go up, of course you're going to go with that. But
yeah. And the same thing is kind of going on with, as I mentioned, Israel.
Yeah. It was really interesting. When I was in church, I was taught that Jews were horrible people. My church, every Easter, we would get this talk about how horrible the Jewish people were. And I didn't learn about things like blood libel or antisemitism, the roots of it, until I actually got into history classes and started studying how this came to be. My class on the Holocaust was horrifying. It really gave me an appreciation for what these people have gone through. But yet my church was telling me they were all horrible people. Well, then all of a sudden, when Pat Robertson came out and Jerry Falwell, well, Israel is our friend because we need them to be in place for Jesus to come back. That was the theory we were given, that we need to support them at all costs and the whole conflict that's going on there is such a deep mess. We could spend a whole show on that.
And I have.
Yeah, and you have, and I've seen it. Yeah. I feel sorry for the people that are trapped in the middle. I feel horrible for them. They're the ones who are really suffering. And when I look at history, this has been going on for thousands of years. We've been fighting over this land for thousands of years. And I honestly believe, I know people on both sides who just want to live in peace. They just really want to live in peace. And there are fundamentalists, again, on both sides who are driving things. And I don't know, what do you do? They've got all the guns. But I do believe very deeply that most of the people really just want peace. And I don't know how to, I wish I had an answer. If I could, I'd solve it in a second, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned that they have the guns. That's also the case here in the United States, where the fundamentalists have the guns.
Yes, and they want more guns, and they want more guns. And I mention in the book, I actually grew up hunting. I learned how to shoot, and I don't recognize the America today, the pro-gun people today. I was taught by an expert marksman. My dad, was in the Army, and the things he taught me about guns, he would not recognize today. I was in, we have a shopping store. It's called Kroger. It's a supermarket. I think you have, is it Albert's? I'm not sure who you have out there. But anyway, guy in front of me has a 9mm pistol stuck down the crack of his butt in a store. And that was not what I was ever taught about guns. But there's a story in the book where the local gun shop burns down in my town.
Yeah.
And everybody in my church was thrilled because all the records of gun ownership were gone. They were happy to have these guns. There are actually people who are hiding their guns in Bibles. I know people who do this because they are convinced that the government is going to come and take their guns and their Bibles away. And my take on this is, well, of course, no, they're not, but they're using this fear factor to get even more guns out on the street.
Yeah.
Guns. And, the guns are more powerful, so they need a more powerful gun to fight back against the guy who's got. Where does it end? Are they? Where does it end? Every other developed country in the world, I sometimes first world nation comes across as a little derogatory. I don't mean it that way, but every one of our peer nations has really good comprehensive gun control, and they don't have we're the only one with this problem. So I know it's complex. There are nuances there, but I don't think having 2 guns per person right now on average for our whole population, I don't think that's the answer. A little common sense would help here, go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 100, just right here in my studio, just in case I get attacked by a jihadist or something.
I mean, it's scary. It's scary.
Yes. And that was a joke to everyone out there.
I knew you were joking, but I was gonna say,
No
that
guns
it does lead up into a good point where they being the pro-gun lobby are trying to convince you and I that we necessarily need a
Right.
gun, to stay safe. So it was a joke, but you actually made a really good point.
Yeah, it's you look at I'm with you. I don't see a lot of hope at this point.
It's scary.
I think it's too late in many respects. And I don't know how to fix the problem at this point. I really don't. I know that the Democrats have been absolutely disappointing in how they've been tackling a lot of these issues, almost as if they're just falling asleep at the wheel. Are you familiar with Project 2025?
I am not. No.
I did an episode of that you should
I will check it out.
Check out, and basically it is it's what the Republicans hope to do if they gain power.
Scary.
And it is a fundamental. I mean, the things that you mentioned in your book, I mean, it serves as a blueprint for what they want to do.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely scary. I mean, they want to basically make it a to turn people who are homosexual into sex offenders.
I know. Yes. Yes, they really want to make it criminal, and I just keep telling everybody. I mean, it sounds like I'm just here just to sell a book, but I'm like, I'll give the book away free to classrooms or something if we could just get people to understand that I've been on the inside. I know how these people are thinking. I've got their whole playbook. Nothing that's happening is really surprising me. And yet when I go out and try to talk about it in the general public, people are like, "Oh, no, you're overreacting." No, no, we're not overreacting.
No, I mean, there's some scary stuff coming.
Yes.
What do you credit with your ability to not get? See, for me, I got to a point in my childhood where my home life was very, very disrupted. You know, religion was not. I mean, I went to Catholic school. I was an altar boy, but religion was not ever. I didn't ever feel it was thrust upon me, right?
Okay.
So I didn't have parents at home that were kind of pressuring me. But I did find that I had a lot of questions that weren't being answered, and I ended up spending time at the library and
Mm-hmm.
fell in love with Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla. In fact,
Yes.
other boys my age probably had pinups on their wall. I had a not a pinup, but a poster of Albert Einstein.
I had Carl Sagan.
Yeah. And that's what really got me out, was religion did not make sense to me. The things that were being told to me did not make sense to me.
Yes.
And so I found science and got lost into science. Now, what do you think got you to a point where, because I mean, your parents were, I mean, religion was very important to your parents,
Yes.
where it wasn't with mine as much.
Yeah.
How do you think that you somehow came out of this?
It is. It was, as the book says, a journey. At first, it's interesting. I don't want to regress too far, but my parents, although they were religious in the sense that most Americans think church is good, religion's good. We're just going to help our kids by sending them to synagogue or temple or church. And they just give it a free pass. So by the time they realized there was a problem with me, and they were like, "Mark, you can switch churches. You just go to church." And I'm like, "No, mom and dad, you're wrong. I am in the true religion. You guys are going to burn if you don't listen to me." So I was in too deep.
Right.
But as life went on, like I said, I led this double life where I was getting heavy doses of science, and I had to compartmentalize that and kind of push it to the back of my head. But it kept growing and growing and growing. And finally, I got to college and was really introduced to free thinking. And that started me on the path to being more comfortable with myself, my own decisions. I was taught in church that I was worthless, that I needed Jesus to save me. And as I learned more about the world in college through a lot of the classes I took, I learned I could depend on myself. I could depend on my own decisions. And frankly, I've read the Bible cover to cover so many times. And if you try to take it literally, it's just utter nonsense. It just doesn't make sense. And I grew more comfortable with criticizing. I was afraid to criticize it originally. And I took religion classes in school where we were able to look at other religions and critique religion from an intellectual viewpoint.
Right.
And it was not an instantaneous thing. I didn't just wake up one day and go, "Oh, I don't believe in God anymore." It was just this culmination of so many events of the church. Uh, just for example, I don't want to make my answer too long, but I learned in church that it was okay for people to kill people if God said so. I mention it in the Abraham and Isaac chapter of
Right.
my book, and I was kept that in the back of my mind. Could people really kill someone because God told them to? Well, then on September 11th, 2001, as I watched those planes fly into those buildings, I realized people really are killing in the name of religion. And it made me look deep inside myself and say, is this really who I am? Is this what I want to be associated with? the concept of sending somebody to hell and letting them burn there forever. I could not imagine ever punishing one of my children in that kind of way. And I just came to this, not just the scientific disavowal of religion, but the morals that it was teaching me or trying to teach me became so repugnant to me that I eventually said, okay, I've had enough. I'm done with this. I'm out of here. I can be a good person without all this. Very long answer there. I'm sorry.
No, hey, please, the more the better. For me, I was actually able to sort of make a clean break from Catholic school. I finally said to my mother, and this was junior high, maybe middle school. I was able to tell my mother, told me I want to go to public school. This is not working for me, because I mean I was the only one in the class asking questions. I was annoying the teachers, and I was being ridiculed by my classmates for like, why are you asking that question? That makes no sense. Just accept it. And I'm like, well, it kind of makes sense scientifically.
Yeah.
I mean, my problem was like Noah's Ark. Well, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Two of every animal on a boat. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we later found out that they did find Noah's Ark, and that story is absolutely 100% true.
In multiple places,
In
yes.
multiple places.
Yeah, it's all over the globe. Yeah.
Right now it's over at Mount Arafat, I believe.
That's one of the spots. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I used to love my grandmother's tabloids, National Enquirer and everything.
Mentioned that in the book.
Yeah, it was, well, this actually helped me, believe it or not, because those were fertile ground for a skeptic, for a young child who asked questions. I was perfectly allowed to debunk Nostradamus. I was perfectly allowed to debunk horoscopes. People rising from the dead could never say, well, that about Jesus, but I could say about Elvis Presley. So believe it or not, tabloids played an important part in me becoming so skeptical. So I don't know how I got on that tangent, but it's a good way to learn critical thinking. Just sit down with a Bible or a National Enquirer and go to town. I'm going to get in trouble for that one.
No one's getting in trouble here. No burning in hell.
Thank you.
That's one of the problems that I had too with it, and again, it wasn't drilled into me as much. This hell and brimstone, and so I'm thankful for that. But it was still this idea of going to hell, that hell existed, was frightening enough. Now you got it a lot worse, because I mean you were actually told your mother was going to burn in hell, and that you were going to burn in hell for all eternity, and whereas for me it was just on the back burner. It's just like, yeah, hell existed, and I mean, I'm probably going there.
I'll save you a chair.
Well, I've got a cabana.
Oh, well, I need to upgrade. It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I don't know if you're familiar with Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis.
Yes.
So I live about an hour from the Ark Encounter. It was one of my first big writing breaks, was actually being sent there to write an article on it. And they have kind of done the pig on a lipstick, or lipstick on a pig approach to hell. The message is still there, but Ken Ham hides it behind merry-go-rounds and petting zoos and zip lines. But if you actually read between the lines in his exhibits, the very first exhibit on the Ark Encounter is Satan telling you that if he can convince you the flood isn't real, then none of it is real. None of the Bible is real. And one of the last exhibits explains how We all deserve to die. We deserve this fate that's waiting for us. Now, they don't show the hellfire there. They've kind of learned their lesson. They've upped their game. The PR people are like, hey, that's kind of scaring the kids. But if you actually go to the churches, if you actually talk to fundamentalist children, and I know, I won't say who they are, but in family and friends who have fundamentalist children, they're still taught this. There are people out there that they're believing in hell. That's the end goal for people like us, for anybody that doesn't believe what they are. And that's why I wrote the book. I walked around that Ark encounter and saw all these children who were being indoctrinated. And I thought, that's me. That was me, 30, 40 years ago. And just felt the need to speak out.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad that you wrote the book.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave a review of the book as well. I probably will give it another read, because I read it, like I said, pretty much from cover to cover on this weekend.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Wow.
And of course, I still dealing with the after effects of COVID, so my mind is foggy. So it's struggling to remember what I remember.
I understand completely.
What is a young Earth creationist church?
A young Earth creationist church could be defined by just telling you about answers in Genesis. Every word of the Bible is literally true. Every single word. And from that, we derive, like the age of the earth, by counting up the genealogies all the way from Adam and Eve all the way to Jesus. It's an unbroken line, according to them, with people living 800 or 900 years old to age, which is impossible. So we get a 6,000-year-old earth. We get a 6,000-year-old universe. We get complete evolution denial. Evolution is a tool of Satan in young earth creationism, because it ignores the fact that 99.9% of the life on earth right now never existed. So there's a complete denial of the fossil record. There is mostly a denial of DNA evidence linking us to the other great apes.
Right.
There is unfortunately some misogyny. There are verses in Timothy and Corinthians that say women should remain silent. They should talk to their husbands if they have questions. I was surprised that even some very intelligent Christian friends actually believed in this belief, or they held this belief. Women can't be. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, I remember that from your book. You were sitting across two professionals.
Yes. One was my manager.
Yeah, your boss.
Brought me to dinner and explained. He and his wife gave their testimony to me, and she just flat out said, yes, my husband makes the decisions. And we see that echoed not just in creationism, but the Catholic Church doesn't allow women. I think was it the Southern Baptist or the Methodist? They are two major churches to split. One was over women, and one was over homosexuality. I forget which. I apologize. But yeah, so that young earth creationism basically claims to be a science. They have on staff at Answers in Genesis some scientists who can't come up with a method for dating the earth. They have no way of dating it. Their sole job is to deny everything that science has learned, radiometric dating and the speed of light. And young earth creationism is very into something called intelligent design. They say that this universe is so finely tuned for life that there had to be a creator. And I always ask them, if everything needs a creator, who created their creator? And that blows their minds. And they start doing the special pleading. Oh, we didn't mean everything. We can have one thing that didn't need a creator. So that is young earth creationism in a nutshell. It is just a denial of anything science, humans and dinosaurs somehow walking together. I was a fossil hunter when I was a kid, and I found some marine fossils, and I brought them to church, and they were proof of Noah's flood, my teacher told me. And I said, well, where are all the fossils of all the other things that were killed in this flood? And her face went blank, and she had no answer because, of course, the flood didn't happen. The truth was that Kentucky used to be under a shallow sea back in the Ordovician period, I think they call it. And that's how those fossils got there. But you will get a young Earth creationist who will tell you, oh, fossils on the top of Mount Everest are evidence that Mount Everest was covered by a flood.
Right.
This flood is so important to them. Their whole belief system is based on it. So
why is that? Why is that?
I wish I knew, because I know many people who are religious, and they're not troubled by evolution. They're not troubled by how old the earth is. If I could sit down with Ken Ham for a few minutes and just ask him, maybe he's doing it for money. I'm going on a tangent here, but it's really interesting to note that Answers in Genesis has a private jet, and I track it online, and it goes to the Cayman Islands every month. So maybe there's some monetary motivation behind these people.
Anthers in Cayman.
Yeah, maybe they're going to do a new park down there.
Yes.
But but to your question, I really don't know why this is such a big deal to these people, but it is. They are really truly living in a world that existed thousands of years ago, and they don't see that humans have evolved, that we have moved forward. We've moved past the time where you cure disease by sprinkling blood on a bird and letting it go. That's in Leviticus, I think. They're still back in that time period, and God help you, you can't drag them out of it. So you get the kids when they're young, you indoctrinate them, and they grow up believing that, and there's no changing their minds. And again, to come full circle to your intro, we pull education, we pull the kids out of school and don't teach them this anymore. They're not going to ask critical questions, and we're in trouble.
Now, overall, religion seems to be on declining to a certain extent, but on the other hand, the extremism is accelerating.
I would agree with that. The latest Pew research I've seen says that in general, the number of people who identify with particular religion or go to church is declining, and the people who identify as atheist or agnostic or non-affiliated is going up. But we have this problem with these noisy fundamentalists who, no matter how many they are, they're very loud, and they have some very prominent positions in government, not just in Kentucky, but Georgia, Florida, a lot of the Bible Belt states. So even though religion may be declining, and it's certainly declined across Europe and other countries, the fundamentalists have found a good home here, and they've found politicians who are willing to cater to them. So even though the numbers might look good in one sense, the reality on the ground is kind of different.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely terrifying. What do you think that? What do you first? Let's jump ahead,
Sure.
fictionally, figuratively, or however you want to put it. And let's just assume that Donald Trump wins the presidency
Oh
in
gosh.
2024, and he gets a majority in terms of the House and the Senate. What's coming?
That's a terrifying thought. Abortion will absolutely, positively be completely outlawed under all circumstances. Doesn't matter if the mother's dying, if it's a young girl who's been raped. Abortion is going to be outlawed. The discrimination against LGBTQ people that's going to increase. I don't know if they're brave enough yet to actually pass a law to arrest someone, but you can definitely say goodbye to same-sex marriage. That's going to be gone. Clarence Thomas has already indicated that he wants to revisit the legality of contraception. So contraception could go away. We are on the verge already of having government-funded or taxpayer-funded religious education. I think public schools are on the chopping block if Trump gets in, because the charter school industry, and it is an industry, is so powerful already. They're lobbying, and they've cut off funding to public schools. So those are the immediate things that I see. What scares me even more was that he was not really willing to give up power last time, and that, I fear, may have been a dress rehearsal. That maybe this time there will be no giving up power. Maybe we overturn the laws that say that there are term limits. Again, I'm speculating here. I don't know that this is going to happen, but I see people wishing for it. I follow a lot of accounts on social media of fundamentalist preachers and politicians, and they would not be too upset if any of this happened. There are people out there that are okay with this because it's their religion. The problem with that, though, is that pick a religion like the Methodists. What if it was a Methodist government? Well, the Methodists just split in half, and it was over the welcoming LGBTQ people. So all of a sudden, you've got this religious consensus in government, and they split. So if you really believe in a religious government, it's not the good thing that you think it is. You're just not thinking it through. That will be my message to anybody out there that thinks that, it's okay as long as it's your religion, but if it's not, oh, wait. Yeah.
Can you share any strategies or tactics that you have found effective when engaging with individuals who hold deeply entrenched beliefs in science denial or misinformation?
The people that I deal with are so entrenched that I have not found a strategy other than don't cut them off completely. Don't disassociate. I used to do that, but just stay there and be ready for the facts. If they are going to have doubts, if they're going to come forward, if they see that you're still willing to listen to them, then maybe you've got a chance. But I have kind of written off, unfortunately, a lot of people as just a lost cause as far as getting them to accept science or accept equality. I don't know that they're reachable. Now, the reason I still do the work I do, the writing that I do, and the talking I do, is that there are a lot of people out there whose minds aren't made up yet. And these fundamentalists are trying to reach out to them and indoctrinate them. And by kind of establishing myself as someone who's willing to listen, I will get a lot of people coming up to me and saying, well, how do we know the Earth is not 6,000 years old? How do I know Ken Ham is lying to me? And there I find a willing audience, because if you can stay prepared, stay on top of what the fundamentalists are teaching, and have an answer ready. And I think this is where being a computer scientist helps. I'm not an expert natural scientist, but my whole life has been involved talking to experts and translating what they're saying into something that somebody else, like a computer, can understand. Because let's face it, scientists, I love scientists, but they're not always the best at speaking to the public and getting their message across. So just having a good education, being honest about what you don't know, you can reach people, and I have. So yeah.
Have you encountered any backlash or resistance in your efforts to debunk scientific misinformation?
Oh yeah, I think I got a couple. Death threats might be a little exaggeration, but I've had wishes of
Wow.
bodily harm. I've had very threatening messages left on my blog's comment section. I have unfortunately been disowned by some people when I came out. I don't like the word atheist because it still has all that negative connotation that I was taught in church. So I say when I come out as a non-believer, um, you know, my social media account got cut in half, 50%, like overnight. And social media is how we judge ourselves as valuable people, right? I mean, if you don't have a million followers, you're not worth it. So there has been backlash, and I will admit some of it early on I brought on myself. I went through the stereotypical angry atheist phase at one point. It hit me, oh my God, I've lost so much of my life that I'll never get back to going through all this mental trauma. Over 600 or 700 Sundays I spent in churches, I calculate, I'll never get that back. So I was a little harsh, and I do regret that because I think I lost some of my audience by being so angry. Now, I can get down in the trenches with somebody if they want to get into a debate and start slinging mud. I really know the Bible really well, and it just drives them crazy to be out quoted, but that's maybe not the best approach. So yeah, there has been backlash, to answer your question. And I, as a person who wants to learn from their mistakes, have learned to look at that backlash and say, is that something that I did? Was that a failing in me? Did I maybe say something the wrong way? Or is that just a failing in the other person? Are they indoctrinated and lost?
And in your experience, what are some of the common psychological factors that, let's say, contribute to an individual's susceptibility to science denial? And how might these be addressed effectively?
There is, I'm gonna insult some people here, but gullibility is a major issue. And maybe this doesn't stem from, maybe some people are naturally gullible, I don't know, but the superstitious people, the gullible people who are open to suggestion and will not look at things critically, that is a factor. I also think another important factor is the fear of death. We are all very much afraid of dying. We don't really know what's going to happen to us. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I know what happens after I'm gone. There's nothing there. But the fear of death is a driving factor. The fear of not having the loved ones that have passed before us is a driving factor to keep people in religion. Um, and I think some people just want ready answers to everything. I think that's part of humans are curious, right? And people want ready answers. They find those in religion because religion is happy to give you any answer you want. And uh, yeah, so those are some of the main factors I see.
Interesting. And beyond debunking myths and misinformation, what proactive steps do you advocate for promoting scientific literacy and critical thinking skills among the general public?
Well, a strong public education system is the
Oh,
number one thing. I mean, that that's really what we need. I see so much. I think that because of Kentucky schools being in such dire conditions, that Ken Ham found very fertile ground here, just because Kentuckians are wonderful people, and they're not dumb people by any means. I love Kentuckians. They're very, very wonderful, outgoing, caring people, but they are denied the education that they would need to debunk this stuff. And if you don't have that firm basis, if you're just willing to accept anything, you've got no hope.
Yeah, and in order to have I've always said that one thing that has to be done is, in terms of education, is we need a federally funded education system.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
that can't happen as long as we've got states' rights and we've got, the property tax and all that. I mean,
Exactly.
there's so many of these entangled problems within this country, that are just they're so simple, right? But
Yeah.
the solutions are so disentangled from plausibility at this point. And this is where we get the charter schools that come in and take it and exploit these situations.
Yes, yes. And it sounds like a conspiracy theory when I say this,
It
but
does.
I think that the politicians in my state in particular have forced this problem upon us by constantly defunding schools. They're constantly taking money away.
Yes.
Our teachers right now, their starting wage is below, I believe, the national poverty level for a family of four, somewhere in the $30,000 range. Who's going to go teach? And then they don't have supplies for the classrooms.
Right.
And then they step in. It's like the politicians say, oh, we have this problem. Look how bad the schools are. Look how great the private schools are. Let's just go to the private ones. They caused this problem in the first place. And then they stepped in with their false solution.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be optimistic here.
I want to be. I want to be. I don't want to be the voice of doom and gloom. I think just getting the message out there, if we could just get the message out there and get people interested, I don't think the change would come overnight. Unfortunately, Supreme Court seats are for life, and we're in real trouble right there right now. But I look when I can find hope. I look to like Ohio, for example, which denied by law a 10-year-old rape victim an abortion. However, Ohio has the right to put a measure on their ballot for constitutional amendments. And the people of Ohio did come together, conservatives and liberals came together and put it into their constitution that, yes, you have a right to an abortion. In Kentucky, we can't do that. We can't get something on the ballot because only the legislators can get something on the ballot, and they won't give us that right to vote. So I look to states like, believe it or not, Ohio, who treated this poor girl so poorly, is able to correct their mistakes because they have a mechanism to do it. They still have democracy in place. So, we need to be out there fighting in the polls. We need to get people out, but it's not going to be an overnight solution.
Yeah. Well, we have some semblance of democracy, I like to say.
Yes.
Far from being actual democracy. And
Yeah.
that's, of course, another root problem that we have in this country.
Yeah.
Is the limited representation that we have. I mean, again, there's so many problems that are so utterly systemic that it would take a year or more just to go through them all.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think are some proactive skills that we can take to educate the general public, in terms of critical thinking skills and scientific literacy?
Well, I think becoming literate ourselves and showing enthusiasm for the subject. I know in my family, I have a lot of young ones, nieces, nephews, who are very excited about science and school. if they're given the encouragement. So I think we could be encouraging people to be interested in these things, and also make them aware that we are living in this technological society, and we are being forced, whether we like it or not, to make some really important decisions. Gene editing, climate change, are vaccines safe? We need to have some scientific knowledge. We need to have some to be able to make decisions. Otherwise, we're getting our advice from YouTube. And so I think trying to show people that having some knowledge is good for you. It lets you make some. You and I may not agree on climate change. We may not agree, but we could have a better discussion if we both at least have studied some of the science behind it.
Right.
So I just tell people, hey, I spent 3 decades reading the Bible and learning it really well. If you're going to come at me and deny evolution, please at least go take a biology class. Let's everybody be honest and make an effort to understand the other side.
How do you see the role of social media platforms in perpetuating or combating scientific misinformation? And what measures do you believe these platforms should take to mitigate its spread?
That's a really good question. I am really terrified about what I see happening on social media right now. I do agree with the right to free speech, but I think like what Elon Musk has done with Twitter, or I guess I'm supposed to call it X now, where people who are openly racist, who are openly denying that slavery ever happened, that are publishing anti-Semitic literature, who are posting the most ridiculous anti-vaccine nonsense. I still believe in moderation, having moderators. I don't mind. I'll agree with anybody's right to say what they want, but I don't think I'm obligated as a social media platform owner to necessarily give them a platform. Let them go get their own website and do it there, because I see so much nonsense there and people are getting their information from it. So people will say it's censorship. To me, censorship is the government saying, hey, you can't say something. I don't see it as censorship to take down a post that says vaccines cause autism, because they don't. They don't. So social media, I don't envy somebody that has 1 billion followers. I don't know how you police that, but I'm not really thrilled with the algorithms I see and what gets promoted. I know I worked my butt off to get just a modest following of 12,000 people for my science blog, and it's suppressed now. I used to reach 80, 100,000 people, through cross promotion. Now, because of Facebook's algorithms, I get maybe 35 people that see a post that I make, and it may be an important post on. I just did a debunking of a climate change myth about icebergs in the ocean. 12,000 followers and 30 people saw it. So I think social media could do a better job of promoting good content. I don't think they care about the content anymore. I think they just care about advertising revenue. That's a problem.
Where can people find you on Facebook?
On Facebook, the blog is called Bad Science Debunked. There's actually a website for it also. It's badsciencedebunked.com. I did let the blog go dormant for a while, but I've brought it back. I've also launched a new author page. You'll find 2 Mark Alsips out there. One is my personal account, which is just for family, but I've also got a Mark Alsip with author in parentheses after it, where I'm starting to build up a following now where I can talk more about the book. And because my friends are like, Mark, you're talking about this science stuff every day. We appreciate it, but could you? So I've got the author account now where I've got the book and I'm posting more book content. I've got a wonderful social media public relations firm here, the Black Box Media. Give them a shout out. Who are doing some promotional videos, and I'm putting those on my author page. Little snippets from the books that are people like video. They like video more than to read. So yeah, so Bad Science Debunked for the blog, and alsip.net is where I promote the book. But again, I do have that Facebook author page that we're getting off the ground. So have high hopes for it, but it's early stages, early days.
And I just put it on the screen here too.
Thank you.
Facebook.com, Bad Science Debunked.
Yes, thank you.
Somehow I didn't see this earlier. I would have subscribed to it. I'll have to do that as soon as the show is over.
Oh, well, thank you. It's like I said, I was very active. I had, I think, 150 posts or so, and then I just said, I'm going to take a break for a little while. It got to be exhausting to be debunking all of this stuff, and Facebook, downgrading us so that we really don't have the reach. But I'm trying to be active there. I just got back onto, I'm still going to call it Twitter. I don't care what Elon Musk calls it.
Yeah, I call it Twitter too.
Yeah. Working to build a following there. So it's hard when your last name is not Kardashian. It's very hard. But
yes, I can certainly relate to you on that front as well.
Yeah.
It's been very hard to build up even for the show, a social media platform.
Yeah.
But I don't put that much work into it either, as I probably should, to be honest.
You do a good job. I enjoy your show.
Well, thank you. Have you thought about doing a podcast? Do you have a podcast?
I don't. I'm more of a, I guess, actually, I'm a very shy person. If you know me outside of, when I step away from the camera, I'm very shy and quiet. I don't.
Me too, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I would not know that. You just seem so natural at this. Where I actually got to the point where I'm comfortable talking openly like this is I did some Uber and Lyft driving for a while. And yeah, just I had some crazy science projects, some stuff I wanted to buy, and it wasn't in our budget. And my wife said, "Hey, hey, go out and have some fun." And I had a lot of fun, and I got my toys, but yeah, it got me comfortable with talking to people. But
yeah,
but yeah, it's I think it's more fun being a podcast guest than I don't know if I could do what you do. You've got a lot of work ahead of you. You've got so much, you do so much research and everything, and it's much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Yeah, your book was what was there's forgive me here as I try to think back here. There was a lot to get through in the book. And what I liked about the book was that it was very easy to read.
Thank you.
Very straightforward to read. And it wasn't, you didn't pepper in this religious nonsense. I was almost about to say nonsense. I don't mean to say nonsense. I'm an atheist as well, and I've got some very good friends who are very religious.
Yes.
Very good people.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there are many out there.
And they're the friend I'm thinking of off the top of my head is very progressive. Runs a spirituality and activism group, and has been hugely influential in my life. Sorry.
No, it's that's good to hear. It's encouraging. I appreciate that.
It's just, it's sad to think that we have, and you would kind of mention this too, that so many of these people you find unreachable.
Yeah. It's I guess the encouragement I would find there is that at one point I was unreachable. My parents, as I said, were not in any way as strict and harsh as my church was, but my church got its hooks into me and actually had me, ready to disavow my parents. But I think if there's hope for me, there's probably hope for anybody. I would encourage anybody. I'm not here to convert anybody. I don't do that. Whatever you want to believe, but as long as you don't bother me. But I would just say to people who do have doubts or do have questions, don't be afraid to explore those. Don't be afraid to look at other things. I probably would still be religious today had I not had it forced on me as it was. I think that pressure was one of the things that made me crack. So anyway, yeah, if people do have questions, don't be afraid. The truth is not going to hurt you. Even the Bible tells you that. You seek truth. So go out and seek truth.
In your perspective, what are the key differences between healthy religious expression and the kind of fundamentalism that actually poses a threat to democracy and societal harmony?
Oh, boy, I'm going to get political on that one,
Perfect.
if you don't mind.
No.
So all the people who are complaining about the problem with migrants at the border, a good religious response to that would be get your butts down there with food and clothing and blankets and so forth. The bad response to that would be stringing barbed wire, and letting people drown in the middle of a river. Maybe that's not the best. Maybe that's not the best way to go with that question. Maybe a better way is that don't fall for the dogma. Don't believe this rigid, you must believe whatever. I think Jesus had some good teachings. I think Muhammad had some good teachings. Let's focus on the good stuff. Let's help each other out. And then religion is a force for good if you're doing it that way. When you're trying to force other people to follow your beliefs on gender issues or healthcare issues or something like that, then you're doing the wrong thing. That's where we need to fight back.
Yeah, absolutely. How do we fight back effectively?
Oh goodness. We come back again to education. I think we come back to being not afraid to speak out. I know a lot of religious people who I've talked to have said, Mark, I agree with you on what you're saying. I'm just afraid to say something out loud because I don't
Right.
want to have my church angry with me or, lose friends or family. I think we need to speak out. I don't think that we should afford religion this privilege that it seems to assume that it's allowed to say whatever it wants without any critical thought, in return. So, yeah, speak out. You can speak out gently. There's no reason to be mean. Like I said, I went through a phase where I was, and I regret that. But I think more people just need to start speaking out, and we need to keep speaking until people listen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that 100%. Can you discuss instances where you've seen religious fundamentalism intersect with issues such as LGBTQ rights, reproductive rights, or climate change denial, and the potential consequences of those such intersections?
Oh, yes. One that's really important to me now, and my transgender friends, when you actually just stop and listen to somebody, for example, who is transgender and what they have gone through in their life growing up and the turmoil that they've gone through, being trapped in one body, and that doesn't meet your identity. And then you have laws that are being passed to deny them any care whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think, if I'm not incorrect, there's like a 70% ideation rate of suicide or actual suicide attempts among our transgender youth. And fundamentalists are very cruel on that point. They say, oh, well, being transgender is a mental illness, and that's what's driving them to this. And I'm like, no, no, that is so wrong. What's driving people to this is a lack of acceptance, persecution, not having access to medical care. So to answer your question, that is one immediate problem I see with fundamentalism intersecting. And then we can go on to banning same-sex marriages. The most stable marriages I know right now are actually same-sex couples. We could, yeah, I could go on for hours. We don't have enough time in the show, I'm sure, but there are many examples. Yeah.
And in your opinion, what role does education play in mitigating the influence of religious fundamentalism? And how can educators foster critical thinking skills and respect for diverse perspectives while addressing scientific truths?
I think that educators are in a tough spot right now
Yes,
because they are being forced to not tell the truth. They are being forced to hold back, at least in K through 12. I know that teachers are being prohibited from discussing even, like slavery. The discussions we had on slavery in school were an 8th grade history teacher telling me nobody would pay that much for something and then treat it badly. That was my slavery teaching. So I think we foster this by giving teachers the power to speak. We need to support them. There are teachers here in Kentucky right now who are struggling so hard against government restrictions that are being placed on them. And we need to support them. We need to support candidates who support the teachers. So once again, we come right back to education, a good education, and supporting that as being, I think, the starting point for everything. Because then when you send people out there, they have critical thinking skills, and somebody comes up and says, "Oh, dinosaurs walk with humans," you can laugh that one off and go on instead of what's happening right now, which is sad.
And you're on the side that says that didn't happen.
Oh, it didn't happen. No. My education, although I again am not a professional geologist or paleontologist, I do understand, for example, radiometric dating and the fossil record, just from a basic college education. Just a basic college education to thoroughly debunk that kind of thing. It's not that hard to do. It's not that
So
hard to
wait a
do.
minute, Christians are right. Education is bad for you because it indoctrinates you into the scientific line of thinking.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's one of my catchphrases. It's one of the most important points of my book, and I think I may be guilty of repeating it 2 or 3 times. I never in my life had a teacher threaten me with hell for getting something wrong. I proved in calculus once that 0 equals 1. My teacher did not threaten to burn me for doing that. I got a bad grade, okay? But had I made that same kind of mistake in church, I would have been threatened. So the indoctrination is not happening in schools. It's happening in churches. That's where the
Well,
indoctrination is taking
it's
place.
starting to take place in schools as
Well, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, it is, unfortunately, because they're forcing it, but
it's
it doesn't need to be that way. I'm
what?
sorry. I talked over you, Sean.
No, I was saying it's the religious indoctrination that we're seeing is taking place.
It is, and again, that's the danger of these private schools, is that the curricula there, they're very happy to tell you that. I talked to a homeschooled fundamentalist recently who said that slavery never occurred in the United States, that the North invaded the South for its resources, that there were a few slaves, the Confederate soldiers freed the slaves and fought off the bad invaders who wanted to steal all the land. And then she invited me to her Juneteenth celebration at church. She was actually the
Oh,
chairman.
geez.
You can't make this stuff up. You can't make it up. This really happened.
Well, what did she think Juneteenth was about?
I, you know, that's a really good question. I kind of gave up on the conversation at this point. I have a pretty good tolerance level. I'll stay in the game with somebody and talk to a certain point and fill them out because this person is out there affecting other people and I want to know how they think so that I can address it. But yeah, by the time we got to the Juneteenth thing, I was like, you don't even know what it is. Have a good day. Nice talking to you. What can you do? What can you do?
What are some strategies that you recommend for fostering dialogue and cooperation between religious communities and the scientific communities?
I think, well, from my side, definitely don't be the angry atheist that I was at one point because that's not going to gain you anything.
Right.
I think realizing that there are people of faith out there who have no trouble with science, even though, so they will agree with evolution. They may think that God kicked evolution off, and started it and then let it go. But I do find common ground there. I find somebody to talk to at least. And I find that we have things in common, that we both want to do charity. We care about homeless people. We care about poverty. We care about the state of this country. So being able to respect the fact that somebody does have a religious belief, even though I'm not religious, and this is a rather late development in my life, I must admit. I used to just at first dismiss religious people entirely. But yeah, I'm not religious. If somebody wants to be and they're not forcing it on me, there's a lot of things we can find in common. A lot of things, more things in common than differences. So
Right.
I don't need to convert them to atheism. They're not trying to convert me to their religion. And we can talk.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good answer.
Yeah, thank you.
How do you think the media portrayal of religious fundamentalism contributes to the public perception and understanding of its impact on society? Because I think that it's underplayed in the media.
It is. Excuse me. And it's underplayed, I think, on the. So I am a news addict. I subscribe to about 40 different publications through my news aggregator, and I read the news from all sides. I read Fox News, I read CNN, I Al Jazeera, you name it, I read it. And it depends on who's doing the coverage. The right wingers are celebrating the fundamentalists. They're actually celebrating them. They're making them heroes. The left in the middle are starting to wake up. Maybe they'll report maybe a church shooting or something, but I don't see enough coverage of what's happening with like the white supremacist movement in our country, which is very religious based. We talked about defining fundamentalism. There you go. I don't think people are paying enough attention to that in the media. I have tried to reach out to some of the major publications that have published me before, and if the topic involves religion, they don't want to go there. They're very uncomfortable with that. They're afraid they're going to offend somebody. And I think media needs to stop worrying about offending somebody. I think they need to tell the truth. Just lay it out there.
Amen.
Yeah. So Yeah, the media could definitely on the left improve. I've got a billion stories. If anybody out there from Vox or Slate or The Atlantic are listening, they've all rejected my stories about fundamentalism before, but you keep ignoring this voice, and we're going to end up with a Trump-run theocracy. So it's time to start listening.
What do you think Trump's chances are of regaining the White House?
I'm pretty scared. The last time I looked, he was a little bit ahead of the polls, which worries me. I do not. I don't. I don't throw my whole weight behind anybody. I know Biden has faults. I think Congress in general has earned its 10% approval rating, no matter what party you're on.
Yeah.
But we're down to the point, I think, of voting for the lesser of two evils. And I see the left in the middle maybe dangerously swaying away from even going out to vote, which terrifies me. And I think that is what would put Trump in, because his followers will be out there. Some of these elections are being decided by a couple thousand votes over an entire state. So Trump has a chance if people stay home. We can't stay. And people will hate me for saying this. Progressives will hate me for saying this. I wish we had a strong third-party system in this country. I really do. I love a lot of what third parties say, but realistically, for somebody who studied a lot of math in school, your third-party vote in this next election might make you feel good, but it's not going to go to the winning candidate. And I don't mean to insult anybody's political leanings, but I think we need to be realistic about that. I would love to see a good, strong third party, but this is a two-party system right now, and we can't let one side in, or we're in trouble.
Right.
Sorry for preaching.
No, that's okay. That's something I'm struggling with myself, honestly. So it's not. I've heard it before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we're almost. This always happens. We're always running out of time.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that we put your book back up on the screen, and we let people know where they can find you, how they can find you online, social media, and so forth.
Oh, yes, thank you. So the best way to find out about the book is just go to Amazon and look for the title, Journey to Reason, or look for my name. In this book will pop up. It's fortunately a top seller right now, just on pre-sales. So they can find the book on Amazon. It comes out on April the 15th, will be the official release date. The pre-orders are accepted right now for the Kindle version. And if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, it's a free download. I've done that, so people can check the book out, without having to lay out the cost for the book. So yeah, just go to Amazon and look for that book, and you'll find me. And then my website, alsip.net, is really easy to find because that's my last name. And again, if you look for Mark Alsip on Facebook or Twitter, you'll find me there. It's not a very common name, so it's easy to find. But yeah, April 15th, big day coming up. So head on over to Amazon, and there's my sales pitch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for writing the book. I enjoyed it. I think other people will enjoy it as well. Like I said, it's a very easy book to get through.
Thank you.
And it's not preachy. It's just, it's very biographical, really.
That was the intention.
So
thank you for that.
Yes, no, I enjoyed it immensely. Like I said, I got through it in an entire weekend. I probably rushed through it, so I'm going to give it another read because I wanted to make sure I read it before our interview.
I really appreciate it. It was meant to be an easy read. It's just simple little stories to learn from. So I'm glad that worked. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And again, thank you for coming on the show. Hopefully we'll have you back.
I would love it. I would really enjoy it. It's been a pleasure, Sean. Thank you.
That's been a pleasure here as well. This has been Coup Save America, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next week.